Have you ever tried a dashboard spread in your bullet journal? They can be such a great way to save space, to combine different elements from trackers and weeklies so you can see everything you need all in one place. Today, let's look at 3 different dashboard spreads, all featuring Dutch doors that you can use in your bullet journal. Hi, I'm Erin, thanks for planning with me. Before we get started, I'm using an A5 dotted notebook from KUMA Stationery and Crafts. I'll be cutting all of my Dutch doors with a craft knife, X-Acto knife, Stanley knife, whatever you like to call these, they have many different names, but scissors work just fine also, so use what you have. I'm also using a metal ruler to make sure my cuts are nice and straight. Here's our first dashboard. This one has space for weekly events at the top, a habit tracker, a notes section, and also a water tracker, plus heaps of space for a running to-do list. I've also decorated mine with some stickers, but you could choose not to do that and keep it super minimal if you prefer. I always like to start by cutting out any parts of the paper that I need to cut out first so I know exactly what I'm working with. So on the right page, I'm cutting out a little flap that's going to act as my to-do list. This flap is 9 dot grid spaces from the top, 2 dot grid spaces from the bottom of the page, and 12 dot grid spaces wide. I've planned all of the other elements on the solid pages that aren't cut out so that everything will be visible regardless of which side this flap is pushed to. Because of the way most bullet journals are constructed, you need to be a little bit careful when removing so much of the page, especially when you get close to the binding here. You'll actually want to make sure that you're leaving just a little bit of paper on the inside next to the binding so that your book doesn't unravel and fall apart. I actually think scissors might be easier for this part than the craft knife. I worked that out the hard way. But now we should have a lovely little flap in the middle of the page that you can flip to the left and right, which means it's time to add all of the elements that will sit around it. I've left the top space empty, and then starting from the second space, the boxes I'm adding here are 8 spaces wide by 7 spaces tall. That means I can fit 6 of them across the top of the page evenly spaced, but these are for the days of the week, so I'm adding one more just underneath the far right box for Sunday, because I don't want Sunday to miss out. But if you like to combine your weekends into one box, you could absolutely do that and just have 6 boxes across the top if you prefer a more symmetrical layout than this. On the right, I'm adding some more boxes in the space there. The top one is for habit tracking and the bottom is for notes. And on the right side, I'm adding a water tracker as well, where I've got space to track 8 glasses of water every day. It's a goal that I would like to try to hit. The habit tracker and note sections are both 13 spaces wide. The habit tracker is 8 spaces tall, including the extra box at the top. And I divided it into 2 columns, so there's space on the left to add a habit and space on the right to track it for each day. The water tracker is actually 14 spaces wide all the way across, and it's divided into 2 spaces for each of the grid. Same going vertically, there's 2 spaces each there, and then one more at the top for the water tracker header eventually. I've added a grey line at the top of each of the boxes for me to place my heading for each day of the week, or some more information for the habit tracker, the days of the week there. Same with the water tracker, it's also getting a heading. And I've just tried to space everything so that it looked balanced across the page, but you could make things bigger or smaller depending on how you like them. If you're also using an A5 dot grid journal, you can probably copy my measurements exactly and end up with a very, very similar layout. But if you're using a different size journal, you may have to adapt this a little bit to make it fit. As always, there are links to everything I'm using in this video in the description down below in case you'd like to get your hands on anything you see me using. Now I'm just adding a space at the top of the flap to put my little to-do list header at the top of each side, and that's actually all of the functional parts of this spread done. If you have lots of to-do items every week, you could add another to-do list space in the gap underneath the flap on each side, but I think this is plenty for me, so I'm actually just going to go ahead and decorate, because that's what I like to do. So I'm using the motivational washi tape sticker set from the Washi tape shop just to decorate in the space under those flaps. Nothing too extreme, just a little bit of something to keep me motivated for the week. To make my to-do list flap even more fancy, I'm just punching out the corners to make them nice and round, and this is the first weekly dashboard spread all set up and ready to go. This next dashboard setup is fantastic if you want to save space, and I know that sounds backwards, that you'll be saving space by removing some paper, but trust me, it does work. We'll start by removing the entire right side of the right page. I've counted in 12 boxes from the binding again to work out how much of this I want to keep. I've also counted across 12 boxes from the binding to the left on the left page, and then I'm dividing this space vertically into 7 spaces, one for each day of the week. So the left page will have the first week of the month, the front of the flap on the right will have the second week of the month, The back of the flap, when you turn it over, will have the 3rd week of the month, and the space on the right page behind the flap will have the 4th week of the month. So you can actually fit 4 whole weeks worth of weeklies in this very compact space. This is great for someone who doesn't have a lot of to-dos that fall on specific days. If you're just tracking events and birthdays and reminders and things like that, I think this would be the perfect layout for you. To make the spacing for these horizontal weekly boxes, I've skipped the top row of spaces and started from the 2nd. And then each day has 5 vertical spaces of its own, with the top of those spaces being a little header area where I can write the date for each day. Then there are 2 spaces at the bottom that I haven't used, but I'm gonna actually fill that area in with a little bit of decoration soon, because you know I can't help myself, I have to make it pretty. We've got all of our weeklies drawn out now on both the front and back of the flap, as well as the facing pages. I'm just gonna add some pink marker to the space at the top where I'm going to add the heading for each one of these. This is the Tombow 761. It is my very favorite Tombow pink marker. And the way the Tombow brush tip just fills perfectly the 5mm dot grid spaces in most bullet journals is incredibly satisfying, don't you think? Now I'm using a Tombow Fudenosuke just to add the first 3 letters of each day of the week to the space that I just coloured in pink. And I'm deliberately using a very loose, kind of messy handwriting style. I think it's quite modern and fun. The trick to this is to go kind of quickly and not worry too much about perfectly placing your lines, the opposite of calligraphy. Then I'm going to add the numbers in next to those as well. In case you're wondering, I'm using June 2023 for this as an example month, but you could make this work in any month that you like. Alright, so that's the weeklies taken care of, but what about the space on the sides? You can really use that for whatever works best for you. I'm adding a tiny June calendar in the top left corner so that at a glance I can see where I'm at in the month at any given time. I'm adding a notes section underneath that, but you could do a running to-do list for the month if you'd prefer. Then on the right side, on the space beside the last week of the month, I'm going to fill that in with my habit trackers using my PHOMEMO MO2 mini thermal printer, because that is my favorite lazy way to set up habit trackers. And if you have a thermal printer and you'd like to lazily print your habit trackers as well, I will link to this. This is a little Canva template that I made up. There's a link to it in the description as well, so you can download it and also lazily print your trackers to your heart's content. I have just enough space for 4 of them going vertically along the left side, so I'm just going to cut these down to size and stick them in a little stack. This could also be another really good spot to put a running to-do list that's a little bit longer if you'd like to, and especially if habit trackers maybe aren't your thing, but you could put literally anything else that you can think of here as well. That's the beauty of this kind of layout, it is super flexible. I haven't left myself much room for a heading here, so I'm just going to add a bit more of my pink marker down the side and use that same messy, scratchy handwriting from before to add my habit tracker header so that you know what's going on here, and so do I. And then we'd better give the notes section on the other side the same kind of treatment. I actually used to be very anti-notes section. I was like, I don't even know how you would use that, but I've really come around to them lately. I use them quite a bit now, so there you go. Also, yeah, that's my fluffy cat in the bottom left corner there, making sure that I'm staying on task. And of course I wanted to add some pretty elements here as well, so I'm using the Spring Garden washi tape sticker set from the Washi tape shop just to add a little bit of colour and a little bit of extra joy to this spread. But it really does function perfectly well without it, so if you prefer the minimalist vibe, then absolutely skip this step. And look at that, we really only used 4 pages in the journal, or 2 spreads, but we've got a full 4 weeks worth of weeklies plus habit tracker plus a note section, which brings us to dashboard with Dutch door number 3. This time we're going to be making a horizontal cut, and this version will have heaps of space for daily to-dos if that's kind of more your thing. So if the last one you were going, oh no, I could never, maybe this one's for you. To start with, we're counting from the top of the page down 10 spaces and then chopping off that top part of the page. Again, you don't want to cut all of the paper away right next to the binding, you want to leave just a little bit so that the book doesn't fall apart. Next, we're adding 7 boxes along the top in the gap that's above where we just cut off. 1 for each day of the week, of course. My boxes are 5 spaces wide by 6 spaces tall. I left 3 spaces at the top of the page empty and made sure my inside boxes were all the way as close to the binding as I could get them. This does mean that they're not symmetrical on the page. I have a little bit of space left to the left side of the first box, but I'm going to put some decoration there. Now I'm dividing those horizontal parts below that into halves. So we should have 8 big spaces then. There'll be 2 on the left page, 2 on the front of the flap, 2 on the back of the flap, and 2 on the right page. Now I'm using my handy dandy letter stamp set to add lettering to each of these. I always like to start my weeks on a Monday, but you can start on a Sunday if you prefer, of course. I actually think this layout would be pretty good for people who usually like to do dailies but maybe don't need a whole page. It's certainly a lot more space for writing than you would usually get in a typical weekly spread. And I think it could be really good if you like to do memory keeping in your journal or any kind of thoughts and feelings journaling alongside your organizational stuff, while still being able to see the events that you have for that week at a glance because they're just across the top in the boxes that we made that are nice and small. Now I'm going to go big on my decoration this time because I feel like I have space for it. This is the Butterfly Emporium wide PET tape from the Washi tape shop, and I'm using it to decorate along the bottom of each of these bigger weekly spaces. You could decorate a lot less than this if you need to have more of that space taken up. I feel like I've used a lot of it and I still have so much more space than I would normally have on a weekly, so it's up to you how much space you want to take up for decoration, if any. And I decided to go back and highlight the lettering for each day in alternating green and blue tones to kind of tie in the PET tape and make it more of a theme rather than just some tape that I threw on the page. And this is what she looks like. I think this is my favorite. So much space here for memories and events and to-dos, and also still plenty of room to keep your events at the top of the spread where you can see them all the time. And there we have it. Those are my 3 Dutch door dashboard spreads. That's very difficult to say. Try saying that 5 times fast. If you decide to try any of these out, I would love to see. Make sure you tag me on Instagram. I am at erinsmith.art. You know how YouTube works, so if you liked the video, like, subscribe, channel memberships you can join, all of that good stuff. Thank you for being here. I will see you again in another video next week. Bye.